Hi Stampers, this is Kim with Great Inspirations. Thank you so much for joining me today. I thought today we would look at some quick and easy ways to make backgrounds. Now there's a lot of ways you can make your background. You can use pattern paper, you can use some cardstock that you've put in an embossing folder, you can do some paper piercing, on and on and on. But today I want to talk about how I did these backgrounds. And they are very similar, and they are all done using ink, or in this case, colored pencils, giving a little bit of a watercolor look, but this one of course was done using blending brushes. And so for this one, with the blending brushes, I used the basic white cardstock. For the one where I used the colored pencils with a water brush, I used the watercolor paper. And for this one, I just used some inks and the water brush, or you can use a paintbrush, and some shimmery white cardstock, because you can do watercoloring on shimmery white cardstock. It's also possible to do watercoloring on basic white. It's not necessarily recommended, but if you can just make one, possibly two passes with a brush with some color and not get it too wet, it can be done. So if all you have is basic white cardstock and you have a very light hand with your watercolor image or brush, then it is possible to do watercoloring to a point on basic white cardstock. So I thought we would just talk about how I did each of these. But first, let's talk about the stamp set. This is in the January through April mini catalog from Stampin' Up, and it's called On the Ocean. I was really attracted to this simply because it looked like a good set for masculine cards. And there's this nice ship, a cloud, this stylized wave, or you could just use it as an element on your card. Here's a cloud, some birds, the ship's wheel, and the little skull and crossbones, which you can, of course, stamp on the sails of your ship. And then it does have some greetings. It also comes with some coordinating dies. Let me get these out real quick. I was going to check. There are 12 dies. Some of them are duplicates, like the ship's wheel, and there are 2 flag dies. Here's some dies for ocean waves. Here's a die for skull and crossbones, and this outline die here cuts out the ship. And if you don't want to stamp and cut it out, you can use some cardstock, because here are the pieces you can use to make a ship with cardstock. So that is the stamp set and the dies I used for these cards. Now let's go first to how I did the background with the blending brushes. And we've all used blending brushes before, so we're just going to take a piece of, or at least I have in some videos. So we're going to take a piece of basic white cardstock, and then I have my blending brushes. And I'm going to start the very bottom. I started with Night of Navy. I started with the darkest color first. So we'll open up some Night of Navy. And here's my brush. And as you can see, I've used it with a lot of darker colors, mostly the blues. And I'm just going to, yep, there's still some on there, but we will add a little more Night of Navy. And I'm going to do this again, because you don't want to get a big blob of ink on one spot of your cardstock and not be able to blend it in. So here we go. And I just go in circles, and I just go across the cardstock, back and forth. And when I get to where I think I want to be, I can stop, get some of this ink off this brush, and then I'm going to go to Pacific Point. And as you can see, these two colors are really close, so I usually just use the same blending brush for them. And here we go. And start off the side. And yes, I'm going right over where the Night of Navy ends, and maybe even a little bit into the Night of Navy. Just blend it all in. Now every time you make this background, it's going to be different, as you probably have guessed. So there's that. And I think I'll go up a little higher with that. There we go. And now I'm going to add a little bit of Coastal Cabana, but I will change my brush. And again, we'll start right over the Pacific Point. Just blend. And yes, I'm going on down. Just blend colors in. Color over color, it's okay. I think we need just a little more. And if you want this lighter or darker, just you can use a very light hand to get it lighter and use more color or maybe a little more pressure to get it darker. Okay, now we'll go on, and I've got the, I'm going to leave these open actually because we're going to use them again. Here is some Balmy Blue. That's what we'll finish off with. And there we go. Now, this particular paper is 3 3/4 by 5. You could use that because that's the size of my panel, but I did die cut it, so it is smaller. But I usually like to start out with a piece of cardstock that's larger than what my background will be. Not always, but you know, that's where I start. But anyway, there's our background. It was just that easy. Didn't take very long. So that's one way to get this look. Now another way, as I'd mentioned, is the colored pencils, and that's this card right here. And for this, I do have some watercolor paper, and I have the same colors. I have, let's see here, Night of Navy, and Pacific Point, Coastal Cabana, and the Balmy Blue. So we'll start with that Night of Navy. And I have learned with these, you don't want to make heavy lines. Just get a little bit of color on here. Then I'm going to go with the Pacific Point. That's Balmy Blue. Here's Pacific Point. Possible I need to sharpen this one. And I may have gotten it too dark. We'll see. Then we'll do a little of the Coastal Cabana. You can do this any way you want. This is just the way I do it. I like to put a little of the color, like for this is the Coastal Cabana. I do like to put a little of the Pacific Point going into it. Now this is the Balmy Blue. Boy, I have ink all over my hands, don't I? Here we go. I'm done with those. I'm going to get this because we're going to use a little water with our water painter. And I've got a towel here. I'm going to get this started simply by, ooh, I'm leaking. Aha. And that'll be okay. Here we go. I'm going to start at the bottom and simply go back and forth across the watercolor paper. Until I have filled my page with color. And this one has turned out to be quite a bit lighter than this one. After it dries, you'll see a little more of the color, but that's just how easy that is to do that. Takes almost no time. You can let this air dry, or you can dry it with your heat tool. That's totally up to you, whichever you prefer. Now we'll move along to the next card, which is one that I simply used ink and the watercolor brush. And I need to get a block. Excuse me for just one moment. Reach over here and get it. Because I'm going to use this. Put some ink on, and we'll start with the Night of Navy. And then we'll get a little Pacific Point and Coastal Cabana and Balmy Blue. And this is the one we're going to use the shimmery white cardstock. And I know you really probably can't see it on the camera, but there is a shimmer to this cardstock. It's a little heavier than regular basic white cardstock. We're going to do the same thing. Start at the bottom. And let me kind of clean this brush out a little. Just push on some water, and I usually just go back and forth on, oh, you can go paper towel. This just happens to be a towel I have in my craft room. I'm just going to get a little bit of water on the Night of Navy. And here we go. And you can make it as dark or as light as you care. If you don't like these colors, you can use other colors. Totally up to you. Okay, now we're going to go to the Pacific Point. And I'll do just like I did with the blending brushes and the colored pencil. I'm going to go, I think it's maybe a little dark. I'm going to go a little bit into the Night of Navy. And just work our way up. And if you don't like going back and forth, as you can see in this one, I kind of went diagonally. You can do that too. Just get creative. Wasn't what I wanted. Wrong one. Okay, get a little tiny bit more of this. And then we'll go to the Balmy Blue. I don't want it to be too awfully dark. Oh, I dripped water. Hazard of using watercoloring. And let me see if I can fix that. Yeah, not too good. It was a try. But anyway, there is the shimmery white. It's watercolored just by using my inks and putting a little on the block and adding some water. So let me clean this up. As you can see, those were my 3 quick and easy ways to make a background. I want to thank you for joining me, and just as a reminder, in the description of this video there will be a link to a corresponding blog post that has a list of all the supplies to make these cards and also a list of all the measurements. Until next time, stamp happy!